Hello everyone, William Tramp, also known as This Effin GM here, ready for this week's installment of This Effin Monster. Last week, we took a look at the high-flying, whirlwind-causing air elemental, and I am sure you were on the edge of your seat for that one. Okay, well, maybe not, but still. This week, we are taking a look at a classic staple of the fantasy genre, a sweeping classification of monster that is sure to pull the rug out from underneath your unsuspecting players. So sit in that chair, buckle in, and get ready to discuss This Effin Monster, Animated Objects. Animated objects are objects that, through some sort of magic or technology or whatever, have been granted some measure of sentience and mobility. When discussing animated objects in the 2024 Monster Manual, you should know that we're not just looking at one stat block, but rather 4 complete stat blocks. The animated armor, animated flying sword, the animated rug of smothering, and the brand new, or at least new to the Monster Manual, animated broom. Even though only 4 objects are presented, the book is careful to remind us that these stat blocks serve as a starting point for the animated statistics of a variety of objects that your players can encounter. For instance, animated armor stats could serve as a metal statue, brooms as animated staves or tools, and flying swords could be any weapon, though you might want to consider changing the damage type to match. Okay, with that in mind, let's talk about base stats. First, animated armor. Animated armor retains its armor class, hit points, speed, ability scores and saves, damage immunities, senses, languages, challenge rating, and absolutely wretched passive perception. The armor has been granted a bonus to initiative, but has lost its immunity to the blinded condition in 2024. Interestingly, this isn't really a change, as its blindside ability already grants it immunity to that condition, but the stat block no longer explicitly spells that out again. You know what? Hold on a moment. The stat blocks in 2014 previously mentioned that the animated object is blind outside of their blindsight range. The 2024 stat blocks no longer have that rider to the blindside ability, meaning that the new animated objects actually can see beyond their blind sight now. Therefore, no longer being immune to the blind condition means that these creatures can be blinded, but this condition will only apply outside of their blind sight range. Neat! The animated flying sword is also much the same as before, though it has lost about 3 hit points and an associated hit dice, gained a boost to initiative, and has gained a land speed of 5 feet to accompany its fly speed. Now, I mentioned before in my previous video about air elementals that I believe the addition of the land speed is intended to allow dungeon masters the ability to extrapolate other forms of movement should this be necessary. Now, the animated rug of smothering also remains largely the same as before, though it has gained an initiative bonus, lost a hit dice, and therefore about 6 overall hit points. Now, the animated broom is a net new animated object to the Monster Manual, but we have seen its statistics before in the adventure compilation Candlekeep Mysteries. So let's compare the two. As we've already seen, the base stat block only has minor changes, with notable differences being that the 2024 version has been given a boost to its initiative, lost a hit dice and about 3 hit points, has gained a walking speed of 5 feet, and their blind sight has been halved, bringing the range of this ability to a radius of 60 feet rather than the previous 120 feet. Now, my guess is that the animated broom was the only animated object presented to have such a large blind sight range, but no narrative reason for having such a big range, so the designers decided to bring the broom more in line with the other objects. Now, traits have been drastically altered from the 2014 version to the 2024 version, in that almost every animated object, with one exception, has been completely stripped of traits. First, every animated object, save for the animated broom, had, in 2014, a trait called anti-magic susceptibility. This trait served as a unique weakness to the creatures, effectively making the animated object a mundane object if it were to be subjected to either an anti-magic field or targeted with dispel magic. I'm honestly curious as to why this trait has been removed. Is it because the designers didn't feel the need to add this trait to every monster that would have such a narrative weakness, or is the intention that these spells are being more narrowed in their impact? Now, personally, I assume this change boils down to 2 factors. First, word count. Less words spent on trait means more space for art, other abilities, or other stat blocks. Second, I believe this change may be intended to account for other ways an object could be animated, like by technology or by ghostly possession. Either way, that's gone now. The second trait all but one of these objects had was the false appearance trait, which gave each of these objects a camouflage ability that kept the creature from being recognized as a threat until it was time for an attack. And I think it's interesting that this trait was changed when the 2021 Candlekeep broom was released. See, the animated broom has a similar but slightly refined ability called false object. This worked in a similar fashion to false appearance, though it incorporated a perception test of DC 15 to allow the players to notice the danger before the object attacked. This is an interesting example of something I imagine we're going to run into a lot with this series. As 2014 Dungeons & Dragons continued to release books, the designers also continued to refine the rules and make updates in real time. And the 2024 Monster Manual, in many ways, serves as a collection of all of these minor changes made over time. In this particular case, we might have expected all animated objects to have gained the updated false objects traits that the animated broom used to have, but instead, the 2024 rules have dropped this ability altogether, and I believe this is due to a change in the way surprise works in the current iteration of Dungeons & Dragons. Okay, so back in 2014 Dungeons & Dragons, getting the drop on a foe granted what is commonly referred to as a surprise round. Effectively, if you could not see or recognize your foe at the start of an encounter in 2014, you would lose an entire round's worth of actions. This ability made the perception skill extremely important to all characters, otherwise they ran a risk of being significantly less useful in combat than other characters in the party. This importance is what some of us may refer to as a skill tax, meaning that although perception proficiency is a choice one can make at character creation, the consequences of choosing another skill were so harsh that perception became a tax, a type of non-choice players had to make for their characters. Surprise has been changed for 2024 D&D. In the new rules, the surprise condition only grants disadvantage on initiative checks. Gone are the days of free attacks for stealthy combatants, and now the hidden only have a slight, but not guaranteed, edge against unwitting prey. As a result of these sweeping changes to surprise, the ability for an animated object to remain undetected basically boils down to a bump in their initiative, which is now reflected to various degrees in their base stat blocks. Now, I am personally struggling really hard with this change, and I'm going to discuss that a little later when I get to what would I change. The 2021 animated broom also came equipped with a flyby attack feature, which allowed it to move without provoking opportunity attacks whenever it left melee range of an enemy combatant, and the 2024 version of the broom retains that ability. I think it's interesting that the broom, an object not particularly designed for combat, is granted this trait, but the animated flying sword, which is absolutely designed for combat, doesn't get it. As for actions, there have been some distinct changes in the actions of some of the animated objects as well. Now, animated armor, well, their actions basically remain the same in both versions. They get multi-attack for 2 slam attacks, and each of those slam attacks are at a +4 to hit, 5-foot reach, and an average of 5 bludgeoning damage per swing. The animated sword has a bit of an update. Their singular attack is no longer called longsword and has instead been named slash, and now is a hair more accurate and a hair more damaging at an average of 6 instead of the previous 5 because it now keys off of dexterity. Okay, so let me get this straight. An animated sword can key off of dexterity, but my elf rogue still can't do that? Bullshit. Also, can we appreciate for a moment the name change? Slash makes a ton more sense, and the fact that the original sword's attack was the name of a sword was just, kind of funny, kind of implying that the animated swords, wielded another, presumably non-animated sword. The animated rug of smothering had been granted a significant upgrade in its smother attack. See, in 2014, the animated rug would make an attack against a medium or smaller target, and if successful, would wrap up its target. The target would then be grappled, restrained, at risk for suffocation, and at the start of each of the wrapped up target's turn, they would take an average of 10 damage. In 2024, the animated rug of smothering can target creatures of any size, and it immediately does an average of 10 damage on a successful attack. See, this was a weird thing about the original animated rug. Any target of large size or larger were completely immune to the animated rug's damage, meaning that if an enlarged creature took one on, there would be no inherent danger. Now, though a large-sized creature can't be wrapped up by the rug, it can still at least take some damage from the rug's efforts. Furthermore, the 2024 rug no longer places the target at risk for suffocation, but rather just immediately opposes the suffocation condition on the target. Wow, this is by far significantly more dangerous than before. Even better, assuming a rug hits their target and deals damage, their target is going to take that damage again at the start of its next turn, effectively doubling the rug's damage output. Now, the previous version actually allowed for no damage to be taken even on a successful hit, assuming party members could figure out a way to remove the rug from their allied target before their ally's turn. Even further, smothering has been turned into a viable defense option in 2024. While the rug has a target wrapped up, the rug halves any damage it takes, and the target takes the same amount as well, playing into the fiction that if you stab the rug, it'll probably go through and hit your friend. Now, this ability has one small error in it, in that it doesn't really address why a wrapped up target who hits the rug is somehow taking half their own damage, but I guess we can just chalk that up to a dislocated shoulder needed to get the attack off. I don't know, that's always bothered me just a little bit. But yeah, the animated rug of smothering now actually lives up to its name. It does damage, it imposes a significant condition, including actually suffocating the target, no question, and creates a catch-22 when allies attempt to free their friend through incredible violence. Perfect! This is a fantastic upgrade. On the other hand, the animated broom has been hit hard by the nerf hammer. Previously, the 2021 animated broom had the multi-attack feature, which allowed it to use its slam attack 2 times in a given round for a potential average of 10 damage per turn. In the 2024 version, the slam attack remains, but the multi-attack feature has been removed. Good. The previous iteration of the animated broom was potentially dishing out twice the damage with twice the chance for a critical than, compared to its companion, the animated flying sword. They both had a 1/4 challenge rating, and yeah, the sword had a slightly higher armor class, but the broom was just a machine of destruction that could easily take out multiple level 1 characters in a turn. And while that's kind of cool to imagine, and it puts a whole different spin on why Mickey would opt to animate so many brooms in the classic film Fantasia, it was just frankly too much for what a creature of that challenge rating was supposed to be capable of. Okay, how would I use them in battle? First off, it's important to note that none of the animated objects are particularly intelligent or wise. I would assume, right off the bat, that all combats with these constructs would be straightforward and to the death, with absolutely no regard by the objects for their own safety. So much so that to the extent that I don't know that it would even be able to recognize when its strategy isn't actually effective. Now, I think of constructs like these as that sort of frustratingly literal robot that we see in media, following its instructions to the exact letter of the law, and therefore, if it's commanded to fight someone, it really wouldn't have much ability to interpret that command. Second, the loss of false appearance or false object makes for a really unfortunate situation when running this combat as a dungeon master. See, one of my least favorite ways to run a combat is to have everyone roll initiative when a threat hasn't presented itself yet. This leads to a really awkward and very meta situation at the table. Okay, everyone, roll initiative, but you're surprised, so disadvantage. Okay, great. I got a 20. Even with disadvantage? Yeah, I got 2 19s. Okay, great. You go first. What do you do? I don't know. I guess I'm gonna pull my sword out now because something is up. Oh, but how do you know something is up? There's no enemy that you can see. Well, yeah, you had us roll initiative, so... Metagame! You're metagaming! You're taking the thing I directly told you to do, and then you're acting in character on that knowledge! I don't think that's metagaming. Metagamer! I mean, sure, I'm being a little bit hyperbolic here, but that's the kind of situation I hate in tabletop role-playing games, and the new surprise rules absolutely lean into that rather inelegant exchange. Okay, with both of those things in mind, let's jump in. The animated armor is going to fight like a tank. The moment a foe passes into its threatened zone, typically meaning it walks past the animated armor or enters the chamber that's protecting, the armor is going to base up the closest target and then slam them until they're either down or another foe becomes the closest target. The sword and broom are going to have tactics very similar to one another. As they are both highly mobile with a 50-foot fly speed, I believe that they will each launch themselves at any foe that comes within 50 feet of them, and then, on subsequent rounds, strike and then retreat into the air, maintaining a distance of about 15 to 25 feet. I believe it would then focus its attacks on either the nearest foe or any foe that threatens it while it's airborne. Though the sword doesn't have the flyby attack feature that the broom has, I do believe that its significant armor class would be more than enough in most cases to make provoking an attack of opportunity not a concern. Now, the rug of smothering has likely the most patient tactic, waiting for a foe of sufficient size, medium or small, to enter a space within 10 feet of the rug, at which point it will then attempt to wrap them up and finish them off. Now, technically speaking, the animated rug might be best served to attack creatures that are nearby other allies, so that it then may wrap up their foes and then forcibly move their target away from their ally, so that the ally may then take an opportunity attack on the rug, which would subsequently damage their prey as well. But I don't know that the rug is smart enough to use such a tactic, and I also don't know that it's survival ignorant enough to continue to allow itself to be destroyed because its armor class isn't particularly great. But if you want to give that a try as the game master, I mean, You certainly can. Now, what would I change about them? The most important aspect of any animated object in previous editions was its natural ability to draw on foes who were completely unaware of the danger before them, and I think losing that trait is really unfortunate. I also think that a solution of simply adding back in the false appearance or false object trait still creates a problem because surprise just doesn't work the way it used to anymore. So assuming I don't want to change how surprise works, which would have far more reaching complications to address than just these creatures' tactics, I want to present an alternative to the false appearance or false object trait, and I'm going to call this new trait false. The false trait would be a trait to apply to any creature known for being seemingly innocuous, like in animated objects, gargoyles, or mimics. Creatures with the false trait act first in the initiative order. The end. Hard stop. So now, a game master could throw one of these creatures at the party and take a swing and then ask for an initiative roll and proceed, assuming the creature with the false trait already acted first in the initiative. If you like that idea, let me know in the comments what you think of it, if you want to. Now, I also wish more objects had been presented as templates. Like, it's clear to me that the flying sword can be changed to represent a warhammer pretty easily by changing the damage type from slashing to bludgeoning, or a cloud of daggers by changing it to piercing. And when I think about it, I just don't know that the animated broom and the animated flying sword are different enough statistically to warrant two separate stat blocks. I really wish that rather than two similar stat blocks, that we would have gotten bigger objects like a wagon or a house, and I really wonder what that would have looked like. Now, this isn't a deal breaker, but I feel like we could have gotten more mileage by replacing the flying broom with something not already potentially represented in the provided blocks. Now, the last change I would make, and this is such a minor thing, it's really weird to me that the animated flying sword is specifically a flying sword, and the animated rug of smothering is specifically a rug for smothering. But we don't call the broom the animated flying broom, and we don't call the animated armor the animated armor of standing still and then slamming. This is just something I kind of chuckle at, and nobody really needs to listen to that change. It just always throws me off just a bit. Okay, and that's it. That's animated objects in the 2024 Monster Manual for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Honestly, when I started writing the script, I really thought this was going to be a quick discussion of minimal changes. And I was pleasantly surprised as to how much these changes have impacted the monsters in the current edition. Next week, we're going to be taking a look at a truly monstrous foe, the acid-spitting, burrowing insectoid Ankheg. And I can't wait to digest that one. Get it? Because the acid it spits is like for pre-digestion? Thank you for joining me today on this discussion of animated objects, and if you are so inclined, please consider liking this video and subscribing to this channel, as I'm really trying hard to achieve my goal of 5,000 subscribers by the end of this year, and every like and subscribe helps. Otherwise, hey, have a great rest of your day, and I really look forward to seeing you next time on This Effin Monster.